So, Deadly Northern Lights by Thin Red Line Games, here with the scenario The Gates of Fire. I've just completed the Soviet turn 4. At the end of Soviet turn 3 I said it was feeling a bit like mission accomplished for them. And they were struggling to sort of find things that they needed to do. However, I had rebased some of their aircraft, some of their bombers and naval bombers, a bit closer to the front so that they could play a more active role. So we didn't have a lot to do on the ground. You can see attempts being made to push through this really harsh terrain towards targets, but they're really struggling to get anywhere. This is the supply head here. This is the furthest most unit. They've got an artillery unit, and that infantry regiment that was fatigued, he pulled some fatigue off by resting up. But yeah, you can see how hard it is to make progress just on foot or by road or vehicle. One thing the Soviets did do, though, like I say, rebase some aircraft close to the front line, and we put some naval surveillance down here, and then went in hard with 2 groups of aircraft to attack that British task force that had been causing our convoy so much trouble. One group of bombers failed to locate the British ships, but the second group did locate them. We ended up with a standoff attack with 20 points of missiles into them. That got reduced to 16 by anti-air or anti-missile defences, but we still ended up with 2 8-point attacks into a destroyer and a frigate, which with the modifiers would have caused damage hits to those ships on a 10 or more on a D20, so a little better than a 50% chance, and we rolled a 5 and a 2, so appalling luck there for the Russians. They had some shipping in their sights and they've escaped, but it's a warning sign that actually the Russian naval forces might not be particularly potent, but their air force really is. However, it's turn 4 on the NATO side, and we are about to see some NATO reinforcements enter, and I think that's going to be a fairly significant American contingent, and it's going to be really fun to see what we can do with them once they've arrived. So our first step is to bring reinforcements on the board. I'll do that, and then we'll see what we're up to. Deadly Northern Lights, Thin Red Line Games, The Gates of Fire. First scenario, just finished the NATO section of turn 4 in this 5-turn game, so 1 turn left. Haven't sort of filmed any of it as it was happening, but the significant events here were that NATO air power is now sort of significant enough to contest air superiority, or was significant enough to contest air superiority over the Tromso area this turn. The Russians only had 4 squadrons establishing air superiority, and a combination of all the NATO air power, so the 2 Norwegian F-16 squadrons, one of which is damaged, and some Harriers, and then some stuff flying from the Forrestal carrier here, so 2 squadrons of F-14s that the Americans have now brought in, and some A6s and A7s. The A6s were flying the mission, but the A7s here, the whole combination of that lot at least was able to contest air superiority and drive what the Russians had in there away. The ensuing air mission, which was an attempt to bomb the convoy, to strike this Russian convoy that's bringing supplies into Tromso, was unsuccessful, but it was interesting that they were able to contest air power in one zone at least. And the other thing that happened was that every available NATO warship tried to engage this convoy to try and cut supply into Tromso, So you can see this is a Norwegian task force, sorry, a Dutch task force here. You've got an American task force in here, the British here and here, all of them along the convoy route trying to cause it problems and succeeding in causing it problems. What remains of this convoy are a damaged cruiser, a damaged destroyer and a damaged frigate, as well as some merchant shipping. They are still able to bring in enough supplies to keep Tromso supplied. This has 8 supply capacity, and the length of the convoy route means that is reduced by, or the multiplier for that is 0.8, so it's bringing in 6.4 supply per turn, and more than 6 keeps you in full supply. So at the moment, full supply still into Tromso due to this convoy, but this convoy is very threadbare, and actually I'm going to reorganize it down into a single sector, because otherwise you could engage it with missiles and just choose the core sector and blow the merchant up. So yeah, we're going to have to reorganize it like that for the final turn. So what's the plans for the final turn for both sides? Well, the Russians know that this hex here is the aerial approach to Tromso, because that's the route they took themselves. So they want to defend this as an air superiority zone, and they also want to defend Tromso so that the Allies can't simply bomb the troops they've got in Tromso and sort of soften them up for an attack. So that's what they need to do, but their shipping is under significant threat, but there's not much they can do about that in terms of the shipping. So their other plan is obviously to send as much air power out into the sea lanes and try and cause damage to NATO shipping. And on the NATO side, they've got to try and cut the convoy into Tromso. They've got a brigade of combined NATO brigade in here with some helicopters, which they want to try and get over into this hex and then launch, if they can, some sort of assault on Tromso. If we can establish an early destruction of the convoy, we could bring other shipping down to provide naval bombardment, which would improve our odds, but that might be a long shot. It depends how successful our interceptions on the convoy are. If we can't cut the supplies into Tromso, I think we have to give up on the ground assault. It just becomes an incredible risk to fly helicopters into an air superiority zone and then a ground combat with out of supply troops. Although I think if you've been airlifted in, you remain in supply for that turn. So maybe we could try it. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how it feels as the turn plays out. But right now I'm going to put down air superiority zones and we'll take it from there. Start of turn 5 then, here in what are we playing? Deadly Northern Lights, Gates of Fire. Last turn. The Warsaw Pact have withdrawn their convoy back into Murmansk. They can't afford any more shipping losses, and they figure that with air superiority, if they just lock down air superiority over Tromso and the surrounding area, the adjoining area, then they'll prevent any counterattack into Tromso, and therefore they won't have to worry about being out of supply, and they know that their opponent will be out of supply as well. So they're going to defend with aerial power, not give the NATO naval targets, and actually try and get some bombers into the air to threaten the NATO, British and American naval forces if they can. So they're going to try and sink some NATO shipping now while it's deployed around the northern coast of Norway. On the Allied side, I think we're just going to have to suck up what the Warsaw Pact throw at us, and then with no shipping to go after, we'll have to make a very late call as to whether there is any merit in trying to mount some sort of offensive into Tromso, or whether it has any chances of success, or whether it's just sort of doomed to failure. And one of the big deciding factors there is that the infantry, the Marine Brigade, would be, if we lost it, let's say the helicopters it was in was shot down, that would be 6 victory points, and that's a lot to give up. So yeah, we'll be very reactive in this final turn. The scores actually are looking very good for NATO at the moment. The Warsaw Pact are scoring 12 points for Tromso and 2 points for Alta for 14 points of geographical objectives. But NATO are getting 10 of that back, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for sunk shipping. And so Warsaw Pact have a net score of 4, which is a substantial NATO victory at the moment, which is why the Warsaw Pact want to limit their liabilities by withdrawing their convoy and just throw air power where air power doesn't cost victory points. So they'll just throw air power at the Allied shipping this turn and see if they can level the score a little bit. So that's what we've got coming up. I've got to allocate area to these air superiority zones. This is the one part of the game which you're meant to do in secret. Each player is meant to allocate these things secretly in isolation, and then you compare what you've got, and then you allocate. You know, if you're contesting things, then you allocate to these boxes in secret. Now that's easy to randomise because it might as well be random, because you could as a player, you've no way of knowing what the other player is going to do, so you're not going to just put them in order of strength. So you might as well randomise this assignment, and it works just as well as picking in secret, in my opinion. But the cat and mouse as to where to allocate your aircraft is not quite so simple, because you know, the Soviets would have a range of options here, both in terms of how many aircraft they commit to each area that's up for grabs, and how much they want to hold back to escort individual missions that they might have planned. And neither side's really going to know what that looks like. But it's okay. I can kind of make reasoned decisions about how it's going to go. But there is a bit of cat and mouse to it, which is a little bit more tricky for solitaire play, but not insurmountable. So the withdrawal of the Soviet convoy, the Russian or Warsaw Pact convoy, has made the NATO shipping a bit of a liability here, because it's got no targets and it's just waiting to be attacked. Over Tromso, the Warsaw Pact have established air superiority and also got naval surveillance in here. That gives the Allied NATO shipping in here a detection level of 2, so the Warsaw Pact know how many ships are there and what type they are and what zones they're in, so they can tell there's 3 Dutch frigates in there. I wouldn't know they're Dutch, but they probably would. There's 3 Dutch frigates in there, and that detection level of 2 gives them a much better chance of, you know, if they intercept, then they'll have a detection level of 3. That will give them bonuses to attack, and that all just looks like a target. They've also got submarines in here to try and pick them off with as well. So yeah, the Dutch contingent here is going to come under some pressure now, and I'm wishing I'd withdrawn it, back in here, where it would at least have air cover that could scramble out of this base if it were attacked. But I thought that the convoy would still be here, and it would cost 6 movement points to try and intercept, and with 12 we'd get 2 goes, whereas if I was here it would cost me 1 to move in and I'd only get 1 attempt, which is largely why the rest of the Allied task forces stayed around the task force to give it multiple attempts to intercept. With it gone, they're just close in for attack. Anyway, it's a question of what order I do this in. Shall I attack with the subs first or the aircraft? I think I'm going to throw some aircraft in, try and weaken these, and then pick them off with the subs, because these frigates have great anti-submarine capabilities. So if I can weaken them with some missile strikes, then maybe the subs can pick off what's left. So that's what the Warsaw Pact are going to do. We're going to send in a first wave of naval bombers, which will look like this. We've got, and they're doing standoff strikes, this lot, so that would be 20 points of missile fire going in if I'm using the 5 strike value at the end. So it's a question of whether they intercept. Let's make a quick interception roll then, and then I can eyeball this number and see whether it's likely to be enough. So 18 is definitely going to be enough. So there's going to be 20 factors of missiles going in to these 3 frigates. So let's just put a D20 with a 20 to keep track of how much damage they're taking, or how much attack strength they're taking, I should say, not damage. If I can find the 20 on this dice, which, there we go. Right, they're going to get a roll each against incoming missile fire. They've each got a B defense rating, so let's give them 3 rolls to see what they can do. 4 is nothing, 11 is down 1, and 2 is nothing, so they're taking 19 points between the 3 of them. That's 2 6s and a 7, so 7, 6, 6 allocated pretty evenly. Yeah, I think that's it. I think they're just taking a 7 shot, a 6 shot, and a 6 shot, because they were intercepted. Their detection level 3. So the modifiers on these rolls are toughness 8, 8, and 8. So that's -3 for the toughness. It's an airstrike with a detection level of +1, so that's I'm not sure actually. I think this might count as missile rather than airstrike, because it's a standoff strike, so it's missile, so it's +2, so there's a net -1 on these rolls. A 7 and 2 6s with a net -1. Okay, let's do this then. So the first ship, that's a 20, -1, 19, 2 hits. That is a sunk frigate. The second one with a 6 attack strength and a -1 on the dice roll. A 13 -1 is 12. That's damaged. And then the final frigate, a 12, that's an 11, that's also damaged. Okay, so as you can see, this can get very, very dangerous very quickly. I'll rebase those aircraft, and then I think we are going to try and intercept these 2 damaged frigates with our submarines and see how that goes. Well, Russian submarines did manage to finish off another Dutch frigate, unfortunately, and damage the 3rd. So there's a damaged Dutch frigate here off Tromso. The Warsaw Pact flew an air sortie against it with a couple of naval squadrons, or a couple of bomber squadrons, but failed to locate it, and then flew missions against this British task force up here, but again couldn't locate it. And so that's pretty much the end of things for the Soviets, for the Warsaw Pact. They did make some attempts to engage with submarines, but the only thing they found was this British sub here, and that was rather too effective for the Russian submarines that were hunting it, and actually damaged one of theirs. So I guess we could just move this submarine here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over there into the Barents Sea. We could move this submarine here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up there into the Barents Sea. Just withdraw stuff that hasn't seen action. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the reason for doing this is just to not make them victory point targets for NATO action. So anything that hasn't engaged, we will withdraw. Now we did engage with this sub, these subs, so they have to stick around because they've used up their movement points, but we'll withdraw our other submarines so they can't be attacked. And we are into the NATO portion of turn 5. Yeah, just weighing up this helicopter mission into here to try and land. We'd be out of supply, they'd be out of supply. Now, if you fly helicopters into air superiority, into enemy air superiority zones, there's a table you have to roll on, which I've never used. But it's this one here. So, helicopter interception table. So enemy air superiority squadrons 4+. Well, there's about 10 in there, so they'd be rolling on this 4+ column for each helicopter they moved in. And the modifiers to the dice roll would be the helicopter evasion value, and that would be based on this here. So the group average evasion, let's have a look at those seeking helicopters and see what their evasion is. It would be these guys here. Their evasion is 3. Okay, so yeah, they're not built for evasion, they're not built for combat. That would be a +1 on the die roll. You can see there's about a 70% chance of losing at least a step of helicopters just trying to get them in before we even start combat. I don't think this looks viable, so I don't think an attack on Tromso looks viable now. And so it looks like we'll just try and hunt some submarines in this last phase to see if we can pick off any more and call it a day there. So we've got a sub here, or we could come up here. I think we'll start in this area because we've got anti-submarine surveillance in here and a submarine to try and attack. If this looks good, then we could move the Americans up here, or he could have 2 intercept attempts again in there. And then we can bring our task forces round and see if we can hunt submarines in any of the other areas with our task forces, and that will be it. Well, we've reached the end of this scenario, The Gates of Fire, first scenario from 1985, Deadly Northern Lights by Thin Red Line Games.
closing action here in the game where the British and American task forces managed to intercept, track down submarines, damaged submarines in this area with the ASW surveillance chit in here as well, and sunk both of them. They had pretty overwhelming force, both were damaged, put a hit on each, and that was a couple of victory points for the NATO side. So the overall scores here, then the Warsaw Pact scored 12 points for holding Tromso, 2 points for holding Alta, that's 14 points, and then in the last turn picked up another 4 points for sinking these 2 Dutch frigates, which in retrospect NATO got a bit overly ambitious. Should have realised that actually they'd sunk enough Soviet Union shipping to make up for the loss of Tromso, to compensate for the loss, and were actually in a fine position. But committed too much forward. We were actually focused far too heavily on regaining Tromso and not on the overall situation. Lost a couple of Dutch frigates in the last couple of days of this operation. That cost 4 points. So the Soviet Union got 18 points. NATO got nothing for geographical objectives. I wonder if it scores points for geographical objectives held. No, I'm assuming it says each player gains victory points for conquering geographical objectives, so I think it's taking them off the other player, not for just holding them. So NATO points were all based on sinking Soviet Union shipping, 2, 4, 6 points for the frigate and 2 destroyers. And then we've got a ship and 5 subs here, so 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 points. And that gives the Soviet Warsaw Pact a net +6. And +6 on this table here is a marginal NATO victory. Had we not lost the 2 frigates, we'd have been on +4, in fact +2, because it would have been... and that would have been a substantial victory, and even if without sinking the couple of subs, if we just withdrawn the navy, the change would have been, we'd have had a 4. The victory point difference would have been 4. So that the loss of those 2 frigates in the last turn shifted the margin of victory from substantial to marginal, and as it should be. And yeah, really enjoyed the game a lot. Lots of interesting and quite intricate moving parts, and really cool decisions for both sides. As I said, the one that I find most difficult is sort of trying to plan out how to allocate aircraft into the air superiority areas in secret when I'm playing both sides. But other than that, a lot of cat and mouse to be had in how you deploy and what plans you've got, and all the bits of kit give you lots of sort of different options, which is cool. Helicopter transports or air transports, and how are you moving troops around, and how are you getting supply in, and convoys, and the whole thing provides a really quite elegant portrayal of combined arms, having to have that land, sea, air and subsurface, submarines, everything interlocks quite nicely in this game, and I love the picture it gives you. And with that said, I'm now going to move. I'm going to play this scenario again, but I'm going to include all the optional rules. And the reason I'm going to do that is because I think it will substantially change the game for both sides. And the reason I say that is because one of the key optional rules is that you can stockpile supply. So instead of having to just trace supply, the detailed rules allow you to move supply. You can embed it in units so that units aren't automatically out of supply when they fight. If they can't trace supply, they can have embedded supply, and you can stockpile supply by moving it around. and therefore not have to be tracing all the time. And that is going to be a significant difference. And the reason I say that is because if you imagine that Russian Soviet convoy that got set up into Tromso, so they take Tromso with a airborne unit and then establish that convoy into Tromso, and then simply use that convoy for a turn to stockpile a load of supply and then withdraw the convoy back to Murmansk, you're not giving the NATO side the opportunity to rack up all these victory points in destroyed naval units, because they've got no missile capacity and no very little missile defence on their navy. So they're just sitting ducks for the NATO navies. But if they can just ship supply in and then withdraw again, then they're not sitting ducks. They take the 12 points for Tromso, but they're not risking all these points having to keep Tromso in supply. I think that's going to provide a very, very different look to the game, because they're going to have, as I say, the capability to take Tromso and this quite significant aerial superiority for the majority of the game. So I think they're going to get a lot more benefits and a lot fewer downsides. And I'm not quite sure how NATO or what in the game, what in the detailed rules is going to give NATO any sort of balance. I think it may just be that the detailed rules, perhaps the scenario is more balanced, because as it is, I think I'd do the same every time. I'd try and get into Tromso to take the 12 points with the Warsaw Pact, but then having to supply them, I don't see a particularly viable way to defend their naval forces. So yeah, I suppose I'd base the naval bombers and actually more of the bombers closer to the front line much sooner. But beyond that, I'm not sure what I'd do. So I'm going to set this up again. Use the detailed supply rules, all the detailed supply rules, which also includes chemical and nuclear warfare. And actually in the scenario setup, you get things. So you get NATO assets, and it tells you how many of naval surveillance and ASW surveillance markers you get, how many air superiority markers you get. The NATO only get one. How many repair points you get, strategic airlift points, but then you can see nuclear air pulses 4 and nuclear naval pulses 5. No nuclear artillery or nuclear missile pulses, but air and naval. I don't quite know what that means. I'm going to have to read the rules here, and you can see on the Warsaw Pact side they get very few strategic transport points, so they can't use the line of communication map to move very effectively on ground. But they've got 10 nuclear air pulses, 4 nuclear artillery pulses, 2 nuclear missile pulses, and 6 nuclear naval pulses. So I'm going to have to read those rules fairly carefully, along with the detailed supply rules here and any other optional rules, and start again. So I'm going to be back with this one with a second playthrough, probably on video, just to compare and contrast how the game plays when you use the full rules.